What's happening, everybody? We have a new episode of Crossed Up. Bob Wankel, Anthony Sanfilippo, and Anthony, I'm going to jump right into it, man. Don't want to waste any time with the pleasantries and the long intros. We're back. We're doing a second show like we told the people we would do. We are men of our word. Here we are doing a second Crossed Up this week. I told you we're back, baby, and we are back. Anthony, what's going on, man?
Hey, not much, Bob. Looking forward to doing this twice a week. Although if we have more weeks like the Phillies had this past week coming forward, we might not be looking forward to doing these twice a week.
I mean, the good news is you might be talking about a new manager. You know, you might be talking about more front office shakeups. I mean, there could be a lot of things to talk about if things kind of continue on this trajectory. And it's interesting. We record our first episode earlier in the week ahead of the Rockies series, and I think a lot of the things that we talked about going into that series are kind of still what we're talking about right now when we wake up here and, you know, it's going into the weekend with the Brewers coming to town. And it's interesting. The Phillies are sitting at 5-8, and you kind of want to look at this and say, well, they're in trouble. This is not a very good team. But when you kind of just take a deep breath, and if you watch the game unfold on Wednesday, you go, okay, there's offensive firepower here. The Rockies are a decent team. They play really well at home, and they have even when they've been poor, you know, overall. And I just kind of look at this and say, like, it's all right, everyone. Take a deep breath. I understand there are concerns, but what I'm going to try to do over the next, 30, 40, 45 minutes as we work through this is try to get people to just take a deep breath and digest what they've seen and realize that there are some positives here and some really good things that you can lean on going into this weekend. Now, if they can't figure out their shit when they host the Brewers this weekend, it might be a very, very different tune in our next episode that I'm singing personally.
Yes. I agree with you, Bob. I do. I think that there were, I'm a pump the brakes guy, whether you're going really good for a short period of time or going really bad for a short period of time. I'm always one of those people. Always want to say, hold the phone. Let's not get too excited. Let's not get too angry. Let's wait and see. Now, yes, 5-8 is definitely not the start that you wanted for this season. But like you said on the last episode, there's a lot of teams that are kind of in this same, within a game or two of each other. You kind of sit there and go, that was kind of the start I wasn't expecting for that team. I can't help but sit there and say, the shortened spring training kind of affects things. So I'm okay with waiting just a little bit. Now, I'm not waiting long on this team this year. I'm not one of those people who's going to sit here and push it to July. Like in the past, I've said, hold the phone, just carry through. If you can go 500 up until the All-Star break, then you see what happens at that point because you got the trade deadline and things can change. Blah 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 blah. You look at the schedule. Maybe the schedule is lighter in the second half, like it was last year. Whatever. I've always been that kind of guy. With this team, with this lineup, with this financial commitment to this roster, I don't give it much longer than middle of May. You know what I'm saying? Like I need to start to see.
When you say that you don't give them much longer until the middle of May, are you really saying you're not giving the manager much longer than to the middle of May?
Well, I mean, I think it's more than this. I mean, it's more than just the manager. Look, I don't necessarily always agree with Joe, but I also don't always blame Joe. Like I look at certain things and say, like, well, that was a curious choice out of the bullpen there. But then again, at the same time, it's like, well, shit, if the lineup's not hitting, when you've put all this money into this group, like these guys have to come through. It's on that's when it's on the players. And, it doesn't make a difference what guy you're going to in the seventh inning of a game where you're losing 2-0. The fact that you haven't scored in 7 innings is not the manager's fault, right? You know what I'm saying? So like there are times when I sit there and you could put it on the manager, but there's times when it can't be put on the manager. But so what change has to be made, right? I mean, you've redone the roster. You've put all this money into these players. There really isn't any other choice, whether or not you think the manager's at fault, other than to try and shake up the team and make a change like that. And I don't get a sense that this team doesn't like Joe Girardi. I think that they kind of do. Yeah. And so, like that, to me, that would be the thing. Like, if you're still slogging along and you're not, playing up to snuff in the middle of May, and you need to make a change to kind of wake these guys the hell out of their doldrums, The change might be to change the manager who they like.
Yeah, I mean, listen.
You know what I'm saying?
When you step back and you look at this entire thing right now, I think it's very obvious that the major players involved here know that there are great expectations and that they don't have a lot of time to mess around here. I mean, listen, you look at where they're at right now, and we talk about how nobody in Major League Baseball is really separating themselves. Everyone's just kind of, off to a little bit of a sluggish start. Except here's the problem. You look in the NL East, yes, the Atlanta Braves are right there. The Washington Nationals are right there. The Miami Marlins are right there. The one team that isn't right there, though, the one team that has come out with their foot on the gas right from the jump, it's the Mets. And listen, we can do the LOL Mets thing. We can talk about it's the Mets. But the bottom line is they are doing this without their best pitcher right now. And they look like a much better offense than they did a year ago. And again, small sample size, it's early, all of those qualifiers. I think we need to make a resolution, though, at least on my end, for the rest of the show. I don't want to talk about small sample size and it's early. Let's just talk about what we've seen. The Mets are better than they were last year. And if you continue to stumble out of the gates and find yourselves 7, 8, 9 games down by the middle of May, that's going to be a hell of a gap to chase down when you consider the talent on that team and the fact that their owner is ultra motivated to win and will keep his foot on the gas. So the Phillies are not in trouble right now as it sits. They're not screwed. They aren't incapable of making the postseason, but they do have to get going here. They can't afford to fall behind by a week's worth, 2 weeks worth of games. That's a sizable deficit to cut, and they're not going to be able to do it, in my opinion. Now, that being said, you step back, look at the rest of the National League. You just lost 2 out of 3 to Colorado. You've got a pretty good Milwaukee team coming in here this weekend. Like, if you think that the Phillies going into the season were a wild card team, which I did, I didn't think that they were going to win the NL East. These are the games you have to win now. You have to be able to come in at home and beat a team like Milwaukee, who is off to a pretty good start, but they're not world beaters. So you have to get into a spot here where you start to play a little bit consistently and get everything to fire at once. You saw the offense sort of come to life a little bit those last 2 games in Colorado, but they dropped one of those games because they couldn't get the bullpen to perform when it needed to. It just seems like all these parts right now are misfiring a little bit, and so you hope that coming back home now after a rocky start, they can stabilize and try to find their footing a little bit.
Yeah, and it's the thing about going up against Milwaukee is and I don't know if I said this on the last episode or if I was arguing with my kids about Milwaukee. All these conversations kind of
guy, I know that.
I'm not. I like obviously their rotation, their bullpen is really good. I'm not going to deny it. It certainly are. But I just think their lineup is crap. I really do. I don't think that they can win anything with that lineup. And so, to me, what I want to see more than anything else this weekend in this series is I want to see the Phillies dominate their lineup. I want to see their Phillies pitching dominate Milwaukee's lineup. I still believe firmly, and one game in Colorado is not going to be the ha-ha, I told you, but I still firmly believe that this offense will find its footing, and it will do what it's supposed to do.
Let me just jump in right here. It's amazing. So you step back and you look at how bad this offense has been, and they can't score, and all of these things. They are number 5 in Major League Baseball in OPS right now. Number 5, 760 OPS. So you step back and look at it from a big picture, and you're like, they're underperforming, but they still are producing at an elite level, at least by that metric. And I know that OPS isn't the end-all, be-all, but when I scan all of the traditional statistics versus the advanced analytics, to me, OPS is the nice middle ground. What damage are you doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a good number to look at, especially when you're looking at team statistics, because then it's not a small sample size, right? You could look at an individual player and say, well, it's only been 56 at bats or whatever. Okay, fine. But when you look at a team over the course of 13 games, now you're looking at a much larger number. And when you look at it, and you say, oh wow, they're 5th best in baseball. Oh, okay, that's not bad. That's actually pretty darn good, right? I think that I believe in this offense. I really do. And my skepticism usually year in and year out is in the bullpen, but this year it's a little bit more. I kind of like the back end of the bullpen. I don't like. I'm not certain. I'm still kind of in flux with the front end of the bullpen, but the starting rotation to me is, and we talked about Aaron Nola last episode. We talked a little bit about Zach Wheeler. I'm not so worried about Wheeler so much. But guys like Eflin didn't have another. He had another rocky start against the Rockies. That's a little bit concerning. Kyle Gibson seems like he only can get you so far, and then he kind of doesn't have it after that. And then they don't have any. Obviously, they don't have any depth behind those five guys. So, that is where my concern is. I want to see these guys come out here. Their third time through this rotation. They should be getting up to where they should be on their pitch counts to be able to throw your 100 pitch games, okay, or at least close enough to it. I want to see those games this weekend against this lineup, because if not, Bob, then I start to sit there and go, as good as I think this offense is, I don't know if they're going to be able to out-hit the problems of the pitching staff consistently enough over the course of the season.
So it's really interesting when you look at the starting rotation, and I kind of, coming in, felt that this was a strength of the team so long as all five guys stayed healthy and stayed on the field. And that, I think, to me, take the offensive struggles, and I understand that there have been some, and there have been games that have been very frustrating where they're just not generating the type of offense you'd expect, but the starting pitching, to me, is really what's been the surprise so far. But there are two different ways to look at this. So first of all, so far, 13 games, starter ERA this year, 5.43. Horrible. Sixth worst in all of baseball. But one of the things that we've kind of been focusing on is, wow, they're not getting any length out of their starting pitching. I mean, there's nobody that's really getting deep into games. But this is really problematic across the board. When you look at the entire landscape of Major League Baseball, they're still top 10 in innings per start from this rotation. And you kind of go, wow, they're going 4, 5 plus. They're not getting any length. But this is what we're seeing all across the game right now.
Yeah, and I understand that. Again, but if this is really, like you said, a strength of this team, it's got to be the strength of this team. It's got to be a strength of this team. It can't be, well, we'll get there eventually sometime down the road in the summer. It's got to be a strength from now. And that's my concern. And that's why I sit here and I say that. I want to see them. I want to see them have a good series against a not so good lineup.
Well, what's interesting is if you're a Phillies fan, and we do this, and we'll do this 35 more times throughout the course of the season. This is a big series. They've got to win this series. They need to make a statement. They need to get hot. But forget the wins and losses here. Just look at this series and the way it lines up. Tonight, you have Ranger Suarez, who was a revelation a year ago. Tough start against the Mets his first time out. Again, delayed spring training, a little bit behind schedule to be expected. He was decent against Miami last Saturday. You want to see him take another step forward, maybe get through 6 innings, maybe give them a quality start, which they have not had many of here at the beginning of this season. So that's kind of the hope tonight. They're getting a guy on the other side in Freddie Peralta who's been a mess. He's got some talent, but I believe he's given up 9 earned runs in 7 innings or something to that effect. He's really struggled, throwing strikes on a consistent basis so far this season. So there's an opportunity there, you would think, tonight. Just keeping it in focus with the pitching, tomorrow you get Zach Wheeler. And this is a hold-your-breath night. And forget the final line. Is the velocity ticking upward? Is he at least holding his velocity into the 4th, 5th inning in this game? Or is he at 92, 93 by the time he's 50, 60 pitches in? So you hold your breath on Saturday in that matchup. Not so much about the results, but just is the arm actually coming back? And then Sunday, I love this game Sunday. You have Aaron Nola on the mound, national television. The backdrop of this game, and I tweeted this when they were down to the Rockies on Wednesday, but can you imagine Phillies come out, lose the first 2 games of this series, and they're 5-10, national TV, they've spent all this money, it's the Fanatic's birthday, I don't know how many people will be in the stands, but it could get ugly. It could get ugly very quickly, and if Aaron Nola gives you one of those Aaron Nola starts that we've seen far too often the last year plus, ooh, that could be quite an interesting backdrop. But I thought Nola the other night, certainly when you look at the final line, very good. I have a thing here though, and I'm kind of curious and see what you think. He was better in his third start, I thought it was interesting that he was pulled from the game when he was. And I know we could talk about third time through the lineup and pitch counts and trying to ramp guys up. I felt, when I watched that it was more about trying to make sure that Aaron Nola felt good about himself when he walked off the mound in that start moving forward. And I thought it was less about the matchups and pitch counts and him being out of gas. Your thoughts on that?
And that very well may be true. And it's a curious timing because, I mean, that's the game that they end up losing 4-1, I think, right?
Jose Alvarado came in and looked like he was intentionally trying to throw the ball to the backstop.
Yeah, he couldn't. He no matter how much Real Muto tried to stop him, he just kept trying to find holes to throw through. Yeah, and they get behind. What was it, 2-0 and then 4-0, and they got a run late, and it was, I think, 4-1 was the final, if I'm not mistaken, in that game, right? So I guess the curious part of that is I understand why you would want to do that, but if in a game where your offense is not clicking, why not stick with the guy who's pitching well? And I could see your argument there. Right? I mean, now it'd be different if he was having that game and maybe they're up 3-1 at that point, and you say, all right, let's get him out. The offense got us a few runs. We're going to try and get this win with the bullpen. Make him feel good about this start. Okay, I could kind of sort of see that. But you know me, I want pitchers to go as long as possible. Right, I'm an old school starting pitching guy. Right, I'm a Dave Dombrowski guy. He says he likes his starting pitchers to go longer term. I don't know what the rationale is other than what you suggested, and then maybe it's still we're quite ready to go 100 pitches with these pitchers yet. And that's the only other argument I can make. But I agree with you. I wouldn't have pulled him there.
And the indications are that I think they feel fourth, fifth start, that's where you sort of take the training wheels off and let him rip. I just looked at the game and the way it was flowing. He's at 84 pitches when they remove him, and he had thrown 76 in each of his previous 2 starts. So if you're talking about a linear build and wanting to kind of have some type of progression that doesn't involve an extreme jump, 84 pitches, I guess, is a fair spot to be in when you pull him from the game there. But again, I felt like, and maybe this is me looking at it more from the high school perspective. I hate to say that. I don't want to, Mickey Mouse this thing. But, I don't know. It was an important game. They struggled in Miami. I felt like that they needed to come out and win that series or, stabilize a little bit. And it just is such a timid approach for me in a spot where a guy's going well. It's not like he was struggling to find the ball, find the seams, find the location. I just would like to see a little bit more aggressiveness from the dugout. We talk about Joe Girardi all the time. My biggest complaint, I think, is one that is shared by many people. There just seems at times not to be the urgency that you want. And I think that comes from the manager, and I think it flows down. And I don't think it's a coincidence that often this team seems to just kind of be stuck in this in-between. You just want...
Well, and here's what I'll say. And I don't disagree with you. I think you got that pretty spot on. I think that Girardi's where he's had success in his past is that you look at this and say if we are going to make that run and we are going to be a playoff team and we're going to try and win something. You can't let the highs get you too high and the lows get you too low, right? You got that whole thing, and you got to kind of muddle through it, and you just got to be emotionless about it a little bit sometimes, and not have that urgency in April that you need to have in September. And I get it. And so
I know this is going to be on YouTube, but if you're listening to this in your car and you don't have the video component of this, allow me to just interject with a big.
Well, I'm just saying, Bob. I mean, that's the thing is that you could be rah high intensity, but then eventually it gets to a point where like that burns out and that message doesn't land any longer, right? So are you better off trying to be a little bit more low key, and then when you need to get to that level, then it hits a little bit more. But I agree with you. I agree with you.
Where you don't have to be peak Larry Boa. but you
Right.
could maybe have a little bit more juice.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think that's the one criticism that's very fair of Joe. I think it's very fair, and I think because I do think that a team responds to the personality of their manager. I do think that's fair. And when you think back to the great successes that the Phillies had back with Charlie, I mean, why was that so successful? Because he was beloved. He was a lovable guy, not just by the players, but the media loved him and the fans loved him, and so therefore,
not always, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, but at first they didn't. At first they didn't, but eventually they did. I mean, they kind of grew to love the guy, and I think that kind of was, hey, we don't have to worry about it because we know we can turn this on when we need to turn it on. And the Phillies this current group is not we know we can turn it on when we need to turn it on group. They should be. They should be that kind of group, and maybe eventually they get there this season. But you're right. Right now they're not, and so maybe it would behoove Joe to be a little bit more urgent to kind of get that part of the team going, so that maybe come June, July, if you have a stretch like this, then he can go back to being a little bit more passive, knowing that the guys will sit there and go, yeah, we know we can turn it on when we need to turn it on. But you can't. You have to have that happen first. And I think that what you're saying is a very fair point.
And I think that's my primary criticism of what I've seen now for multiple years, not just the 2 weeks that we've kind of taken in here at the start of 22. I think it's unfair. There was a tweet that came out. WIP, I think, actually asked it two different ways this week. Joe Girardi, should he be fired? Should Joe Girardi be on the hot seat? And I think that those two questions have two very different answers. Should you fire your manager 13 games into a season? I think that that's insane. If you, over the course of an offseason, evaluate your picture and say, we're going to make a financial commitment, we're going to spend, expectations rise. There's no doubt. It's time for this team to go where it has not been since 2011. Everybody universally agrees with that. But if you size up the picture and you take inventory of what you have and you decide that Joe Girardi is your guy at the start of this season, there's nothing, almost virtually nothing that could happen over the span of 2 weeks that should make you say, nope, we're pulling the plug on this right now. I mean, not even Gabe Kapler's first 2 weeks in 2018 probably should warrant that type of action or reaction at this point.
Correct. You're correct. I want to say something though. It's a slight pivot from where we're at on this conversation, but it's something that you just said. You made this commitment in the off season, this financial commitment, this big financial commitment in the off season to this team and to get to where you want to go. I've been thinking about it, and in retrospect, I don't think they made this commitment until after the CBA was agreed.
Sure.
I think that before the CBA was agreed, there was still the old school mentality of we're not crossing that threshold. I really firmly believe that. And I look at things, and I look at a couple outings so far that really frustrate me. And I look at again, I'm going to go to the bullpen here for a second.
It's amazing that the bullpen is the thing that really hasn't been talked about with this team.
Right. Well, I'm going to explain why. So the Phillies did not bring back Hector Neris in a role that he would have been. Now, obviously, you don't want him to be a closer anymore. It was not something that he could really do well. But what he did do well is that 7th, 8th inning kind of role, 6th, 7th, 8th inning, give you an inning or an inning and 2/3 or two if you needed be, and pitched really well. They didn't want to bring him back for whatever reason. 32 years old, he signs in Houston, 2 years, $17 million. Instead, choose to replace him with Yeris Familia on a 1 year, $6 million deal. So now you've saved not just $11 million because you only had to sign him for 1 year, but you saved $2 million in the first year, right? Because of this as well. This guy hasn't been good since 2016, and I can even argue that 2016 wasn't that great a year, even though he had 50-some saves or whatever it was. I can say go back even a year further than that. The point is that to me is something where you're looking at it and saying we need to go cheap here. And then you look at the results so far, and Familia has not been good. Not been good for the Phillies. Kind of, let 2 games get out of hand so far this season. I mean, he gives up the home run, right, against C.J. Cron, which is a killer. That's a lot. But also had another relief appearance where they were only down a run or something like that, and he gives up. I think it was that same game we're talking about, right? It was the 4-1 game where it was 2-0, and then he gives up 2 more runs, and then it's 4-0. It's like, well, all right, now you're not coming back. You just knocked the team out of contention. Meanwhile, Hector Neris is pitching lights out. Again, 5 appearances, only 5 appearances. Lights out for Houston.
Please.
Would you rather have that at the back end of your bullpen right now with this group? Like, Familia's the one guy in the back end. Like, I like Brad Hand. I like Knievel. I'm not a fan of Alvarado or Familia. And that's where I get a little bit concerned with the bullpen. I don't think either one of those guys are guys you can trust.
So, Hector Neris, 6 appearances, 5 1/3 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 hit batter, no walks. Opponents hitting 111 against him with a 0.38 whip. 2 years, $17 million. Fairly, I think, reasonable deal. $8.5 million a year over 2 seasons. And I know that Hector Neris was not loved in this city, and he had his moments. I mean, hell, there were at least 2 different occasions where he was on the brink of being run out of here. But he sort of stabilized himself, and you talk to people in the clubhouse, they love him. He was a great guy. I don't know. It is an interesting thought that you have about the sequencing. And, I mean, they did go out, and they spent 6 on Hand after the fact, like you were alluding to.
Right.
But 6 on Familia. 10 on Knievel. It's not as if they're not spending any money, but yes, there's a line of demarcation there in which they kind of decided, okay, how are we going to allocate this money? And I think if they were able to kind of hit the reset button on the offseason, they probably would have handled this differently. I do think that that's certainly fair. Yes.
And I think that's the frustration to me, because it's almost like, and I'm not blaming Dombrowski here, because I think Dombrowski was operating within the parameters that he was given. So my complaint is more with Middleton and ownership, that they kind of moved the goalposts a little bit, almost like before they had the agreement in place. It was almost like, yeah, we're staying the course, doing things the way we've always done, and then one, you come back out of it and you can go, okay, we could sign Schwarber and Castellanos, and and really make a run at this. Okay, now we'll. You
know what I'll say though,
and you've already done half of your work.
And the last thing I want to do, I truly don't want to talk about the CBA. I don't want to talk about this, but no expectation, no ability to kind of read ahead and have a feeling about how those negotiations were going to play out. Do you think the Phillies were? I mean, I guess you do. I find this to be a little bit surprising, though. Do you think the Phillies were caught off guard about how the CBA played out?
It's not that I think that they were caught off guard. I think where ownership was kind of caught off guard was how quickly the players would give in a lot of ways. I mean, I think when we were talking, Bob, briefly while this whole thing was going on, like we were all looking at it and saying, they don't start losing money until May 1st, because that's when they have to start giving money back on the TV deal. So they could, the ownership, I think, was willing to drag it out. I think they were willing to drag it out into April, beyond where they did. And then all of a sudden you had a deal mid-March. It's like, whoa, what happened? And I think that's where the players kind of gave in a little bit. And I think that maybe caught the Phillies a little bit by surprise, that the players gave in there. And then, of course, you come back out of it, and it's like, okay, now we still have to add a player or two, and you had 2 guys who both play the same position, but who can really help your lineup. Both wanted to come here, and you say, well, if we throw that money, now we have to cross this threshold. Okay, fine, we'll do it. We'll finally spend that money that we need to spend. But you could have had that plan from Jump Street, and if you had that plan from Jump Street, if you knew you were going to go over
there's no doubt. If they knew that they were going to spend, hey, on October 1st, this season, you're going to get $225 million plus to spend, they would have built this team differently.
It would have been built differently. And so that's why I put the blame right now, if there are shortcomings, if you look and say there's no depth in the starting rotation, or the bullpen could be a little bit better, or you didn't really look at defense when you were putting this thing together, like whatever little part of the team that's not right now, I think you put that on ownership for not being willing to commit the money that they committed until it was far enough down the line that you really couldn't go back and fix everything at once.
Who's the guy I'm thinking of? He pitched for the White Sox, Carlos Rodon, right?
Yeah, when signed with the
Giants. I mean, again, it's early, but 2 times through, and the guy has had some success the last couple seasons, and he's looked very good in 2 starts. So that would be and signed a reasonable deal this offseason. To me, you talk about a team that lacks pitching depth in the starting rotation, and a move like that might have made quite a bit of sense. Now, they might tell you, hey, listen, we went out and traded for Kyle Gibson last offseason. He's making decent money. We love Ranger Suarez, Zach Eflin we believe in. And so a guy like Rodon doesn't make a ton of sense because we have 5 really good guys, but, I don't know.
Yeah, but you don't have 6. And you need 6, 7, 8. Like, those guys need to be here, even if they're not
you don't
Carlos
need Carlos Rodon if you have 2 interesting options sitting at Lehigh Valley, and they do not. So I think that's where a guy like, you look at this all-in situation, it's time to win. That's where he makes a little bit more sense for the Phillies. But listen.
Yeah, and you know what, Rodon? So if you let's just play revisionist history here real quick. Rodon, let's say you do go there, right? Carlos Rodon, you sign him. What does that make Ranger Suarez? It puts Ranger Suarez into that unique role that he was in a year ago, which was where he excelled, where he could be a 3-inning guy out of the pen, or he could help the back end of the bullpen, or if there was an injury, he could jump in and start and be that wild card extra guy that really makes your team good, right? I mean, so there's nothing wrong with that, and they didn't. They left themselves short there, and what? Like I look at the 40-man and I'm like, who's coming in, man, to start? Hans Kraus,
Allie Poulter time. So. This has not happened yet, so let's just focus on what we. I think we'll get a chance to revisit this conversation.
Absolutely,
we're going to have an opportunity to revisit this conversation, unfortunately. But so I want to just kind of run through a couple quick things here. You see the week that Kyle Schwarber had in Colorado. Are we off the panic button on Kyle Schwarber? I mean, I don't know that you or I were ever on it, but I know that the city was melting down through 10 games after watching him bounce into double plays every other night. And
well, I was never on the panic button, but I also had tempered expectations for him to begin with. He's not a 300 hitter, right? The guy's just not going to hit that well. I mean, he's going to get on base and he's going to hit home runs. And so as long as his on-base percentage is pretty good and he's hitting the home runs with the regularity that you need him to hit the home runs, I'm cool with Kyle Schwarber in the lineup. So no, I was not panicked, but at the same time, I was not. I don't have great expectations. I don't think he's an all-star by any stretch of the imagination.
So my question to you would be: do you put him back in the leadoff spot eventually, where they theoretically signed him to be in the first place, or do you say, you know what, this is going to work? Just let him hit in the middle of the lineup. They can figure it out up top with other guys like Gene Segura and JT Realmuto, which is what they seem to want to do. At least that's what they want to do this weekend.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this last week. The one thing, I don't mind Schwarber leading off. The one thing that, because I understand we're in an era where there's unconventional leadoff hitters, and you don't really have a more conventional guy to put in that spot. But I do have a concern when you get to the 7th inning and a team looks and says, "Oh, you got Schwarber, Hoskins, Harper coming up. Let's go get a lights-out lefty out of the pen," and we got 2 out of the 3. Right? I mean, so that to me, and that's at the top of your lineup every time. I don't particularly like that. If you were going to, as long as you can keep a gap of 2 players between Schwarber and Harper, I'm okay with it. So do you want to bat Harper cleanup? If you go 1-4 with them, okay. If not, if you want to keep Harper at 2 or 3, then you got to bat Schwarber down. And I'm okay with that too.
I just genuinely don't believe that this lineup has been settled yet. And I know that there are a lot of different
13 different lineups and 13 different games.
And I don't think that they know. I think that the teams always want to tell you we have a plan, we know what we're doing. If plan A doesn't work, we have a plan B in place. And I don't want to come across in an insulting manner. I don't think that Joe is sitting in his office throwing darts, but I do think that he thinks about this lineup and says, I just don't know yet. And that's not ridiculous. I mean, you're talking about 2 weeks. So but I just think that we are going to continue to see this lineup jumble again and again and again over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And I know Joe kind of expressed that we want to try to stabilize things at the top and run with this Real Muto, Segura, if Real Muto's not playing, Badgine in the one. I just don't think that they have any stability there whatsoever, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't figure this out for at least a few more weeks.
And don't be surprised, Bob. I'm going to throw this out there, too.
I'm going to love this.
You are going to love this. And it could be as soon as tonight, but probably maybe not till the next series. I think Odubel's going to be back on this roster.
Absolutely.
And if they still have some volatility at the top of the lineup, he might get a couple shots up there. He might.
I think that if you've read me, listened to me over the last 2 years, Odubel Herrera, I'll start by saying, I guess we have to do the whole disclaimer, right? Like, we don't agree with what he did. I guess he was a bad guy. Maybe he still is. Different people have different beliefs about, can you rehabilitate yourself after something like that, or is that just kind of ingrained in you? And we don't need to dive into the morality issue here. I'm not really interested in having that conversation at this point. But just from a purely baseball standpoint, when I look at Odubel Herrera, I think that there is a place for him on a major league roster. I do think that he's a useful player, and I think that when you look at the Phillies' continued deficiencies in the outfield on multiple levels, Odubel Herrera probably should be in this lineup. And I know that there are probably people listening to this going, oh, my God, and I understand in 2022 that we're still doing Odubel Herrera. Like, how is this still a thing? I get the frustration, but the reality is what the reality is. And the reality is that they have an issue in center field, and he probably continues to be their best option, at least from a pure talent standpoint. That's my appetite for Odubel Herrera as a baseball player, as a fourth outfielder that can kind of come in and hit righties. But when you tell me that he may be a guy that hits at the top of the lineup for this team, that's where you lose me. And I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm just saying that's something I can't get behind. I can get behind Odubel Herrera 2 to 3 times a week, hitting 8, hitting 9. Imagine Odubel Herrera against a righty hitting 9. Like, then you got yourself some juice in your lineup. You know that you have a deep lineup at that point. But Odubel Herrera running out batting leadoff, that's something that if you're watching this right now, you can see my face as I'm saying this. I mean, I'm completely exasperated by that.
and I tend to agree with you. Like, my argument for Herrera for last year and this year is, yeah, he's not a leadoff hitter, he's not a 2-hitter, he's not a top of the lineup guy, but you could do a hell of a lot worse than Odubel batting at the bottom of your lineup and playing half the time or platooning in center field. You could do a lot worse in this league, and a lot of teams do a lot worse in this league than Odubel does. I mean, if you really look at his numbers from last year, they're not awful. They're not
actually
great,
really not bad when you look at what he did down the stretch, and they're really not bad when you look at what he did down the stretch, especially against righties. So
yeah, I mean, they're not awful.
You can unlock the value of Odubel Herrera. I can't believe I said this, but you kind of can unlock the value of Odubel Herrera when used properly. And using him properly does not entail putting him out there 6 times a week, especially against lefties, especially at the top of the order. But I do think that he is a useful, tweener, fourth outfielder type.
Lengthens your bench, too, in a lot of ways.
It sure does.
I mean, because when you look at it right now, that's another concern that I have, is that they don't have a bench.
Yeah, so I had this thing here, and I told you we were going to try to keep it to 45 minutes, and I'm watching the clock tick away at 39 now. But I do kind of have a couple questions here, and it sort of, I guess, all ties in together, and so we can just sort through all of this at once. The Phillies bench has not really been talked about at this point because some of the prominent players have struggled, because the starting pitching issues that have existed. But at some point down the line here, and probably sooner rather than later, we're going to have to talk about the bench and how this thing stacks up, especially as the roster sizes shrink and all of that. you have Alec Boehm, who had the nightmare game against the Mets in the opener, Game 4 of the season, has since been a little bit better defensively. He's swung a hot bat. You have to keep him on the field at this point, right? Didi Gregorius looks like he's day-to-day with an injury, the hand issue. Johan Camargo's been awesome. Bryson Stott has been disappointing. What do you make of this whole thing, I guess, if we can just lump all of this together?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird, right? I mean, and the thing is that just as soon as you're ready to say, well, okay, we got to keep Bowman in the lineup, Stott's struggling, maybe you send Stott down, get him playing regularly in AAA, and get his swing back or whatever he needs to do. And then inevitably what's going to happen, that Bohm's going to have another bad game at third, or he's going to start to go cold, and it's like, okay, see, now what do we do? So it's kind of a tough call, but I do think that might be the right way to go, at least for a short term, Bob, is maybe go with Bohm at third, and then, Didi assuming Didi's healthy, obviously he has the hand injury. We're going to see what that is. But you got Didi, and then you got Camargo, who can kind of play either position if need be, or Bohm can go over to first and give Reese a day off or give Reese a DH spot. And I think Stott. I mean, look, I saw a couple of this. I mean, he's 0 for what? 0 for 18 now. But his last couple of at bats weren't brutal in Colorado. He made some nice contact on a couple of balls, hit the ball hard, just right at people. I mean, the last at bat was a strikeout, but he was sent up there with the intention of trying to just get on base, take some pitches, and he took the first. He was up 2-0, and then the next two pitches were borderline strikes, 2-2, and then eventually he strikes out on a slider that he had no chance on that he swings at. So I think that he's close, and I think he's the kind of kid that can get it back quick. I don't think he's like a Scott Kingery type, right?
I was just going to say, I like his mental makeup. I think that he has a plan. I think that even struggling here early on, I'm not really sure that his confidence is wavered or anything of that nature. And he's talked a little bit about being a little bit jumpy, making contact a little bit ahead of where he wants to be. It's very obvious there is a little bit of a press going on here. The strike zone sort of expanding on him a little bit. And the thing that was so impressive about him in Clearwater was, wow, look at the pitch selection. He knows how to work counts, when to get his pitch, and we haven't seen that as much lately. My concern with Bryson Stott is two things. And listen, the last 5 games, he's 0 for his last 16, 7 strikeouts. He's only been on base once. He's walked once. The problem that I have is, and we're talking here on April 22nd, you go back to last Friday, and since the third game of the Marlins series, he went 0 for 5, then he went 0 for 3 on, I believe, Monday night, and then had a pinch hit on Tuesday. And granted, there's been a day off mixed in here, but you're talking about 8 plate appearances, 9 plate appearances for a guy over a 6-7 day span. And the thing that you talked about with Bryson Stott was, I don't care if he plays second, short, third, all of the above, but he's got to get consistent at bats. And so if Joe, needing to win now and needing to win early and get this team righted, feels that Bryson Stott isn't the guy that's going to do it, then you got to get him out of here. You can't do this thing where, we'll play you every third day, we'll give you a pinch hit the other days, and you're getting 7 to 10 plate appearances a week. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right about that. And the thing of it was, Bob, and I think that 0 for 5 is what – I mean, he struck out 5 times in that game, right? I mean, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
at least 4. I think he just did strike out 5 times. And it kind of got
lost a little bit because it came in a 10-3 win. It was the one game that they win in Miami, and everybody else hit. They got out to an early start, so you kind of say, no big deal. But yeah, I mean, that was the game where you said, this is something we have to look at now.
Yeah, when you strike out 5 times in a game, the other team's got something figured out on you, and you don't know what it is, right? I mean, so that's the key. I mean, he's got to figure out how teams are pitching him, and once he does, and I think he will. I think he will figure it out.
I do too.
But at the same time, like you said, if it's a situation now where the Phillies are 5-8 and not that they're 8-5, does it behoove you to just send them down, even if you only send them down for 2 weeks? Send them down, just work on hitting a little bit. let's get this team figured out up here, and then we'll bring you
and
back,
you would think,
kind of thing.
And when you,
I would be. Okay, I think you have to.
2 weeks ago, you look at this offense and say, "Wow, you have Schwarber and Castellanos and Harper and Real Muto and Gene Segura, and look at this plus all the way up and down." Bryson Stott doesn't have to be that guy. It takes some of the pressure off. And in a perfect world, that is the case. And in theory, that should still be the case moving forward. But they need him to be functional, and he has not been since that opening series, and now that creates an issue where, especially when Johan Camargo has played as well as he has, he's, I think, the wild card in this entire thing, and he can play pretty good defense in multiple positions, and so I think Johan Camargo came to Philadelphia, by the way, because he felt that he could start here. Johan Camargo didn't come to the Phillies to play once a week. So I think he understood that there was an opportunity that things could go wrong. He knew that Didi Gregorius was coming off a bad year. He knew that Bryson Stott was unproven. He knew that Alec Boehm struggled in 2021. He knew what was going on when he came here, and so far, to his credit, he seized the opportunity. And if nothing else, it creates a little competition. The Phillies have enough pressure to compete and win games as it is, but internally on a roster, there's a difference between external and internal competition. And the Phillies right now have some internal competition in that infield, and I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, it really is. It really is. And you talk about the no pressure that you were expecting for Bryson Stott. That's kind of been what's worked for Alec Boehm. Like, he's not had to be in the pressure spots that he was in a year ago. And I think that's why he's been as more successful. Yeah, he's made a couple of changes to the way he's approaching things at the plate. But there's a lot less pressure on him.
So
right
I want to just talk about Alec Boehm very quickly before we get out of here. And we talked a little bit about him, I guess, on Monday's show, and I had sort of hypothesized, just based on what has been said by other people as well, that I think the Phillies could be angling potentially here to drum up some trade interest for Alec Boehm. And Ken Rosenthal actually wrote an interesting piece in his notes column for The Athletic. I guess it was on Thursday, I believe this appeared. You look at the investments the Phillies have had in this offense, and guys that really are not plus defenders by any stretch of the imagination. And it sets up an interesting scenario moving forward. Rhys Hoskins is under contract one more year beyond 2022. And you have Alec Boehm across the infield. To me, I don't see a scenario where you have an aging Bryce Harper, an aging JT Realmuto, you have a bad defender in Alec Boehm and a bad defender in Rhys Hoskins, and the investments in Schwarber and Castellanos. Something's got to give here. Like, the Phillies aren't going to move forward with both Hoskins and Boehm. Those are the two guys that you have a little bit of flexibility with. Whether it's just simply allowing Rhys Hoskins to play out his original contract and then he becomes a free agent, or do you move one of those guys? And I think the Phillies will probably be a little bit more proactive in this regard. I'm not telling you that this July they're going to trade Rhys Hoskins or Alec Boehm, but there is an interesting dynamic that's playing out slowly here. The Phillies have to make a decision what they want to do. There's no way moving forward that they're going to put big-time investments in both Rhys Hoskins and then allow Alec Boehm to play across, whether it be at third base or first base or DH.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good long look at this, because I think that you're right. I don't think this is something that the Phillies are looking to make this change, tomorrow, or if they have to make a trade or whatever the case might be. I don't think it's something they're looking to do tomorrow, but I do think it's something that's kind of on their radar and say, when can this make the most sense for us? How do we make it work, and how can we make ourselves better using this potential of moving one of these guys? I do think it will happen this year. I don't think that come September that all these guys are on this roster.
I've been alluding to this for a year now. I just think
it depends on which one it is, Bob,
yeah,
right?
I mean, I've kind of said I considered it at some point with Rhys Hoskins, and I know he's maybe the most likable guy on the team, and face of the franchise and all that stuff. Or I think that was the thought at a time, and a very productive hitter and all of those things. Great dude. I just wonder though, especially now with Schwarber and Castellanos here, if he's long for this organization. I do wonder that. And I'm not saying that he's out the door, and it actually could be very much possible that Alec Boehm is the guy that is not here. But I don't foresee a scenario in which all of these guys, as constructed, like you look at this team and you know that defensively it has deficiencies. I don't think there's any chance at all that the Phillies are going to move forward with this same defense going into next year. They're just not going to do it. And so how do you improve? Do you go out and sign a premium center fielder and spend even more money? At some point, something has to give. So that's my thought on that. But more in the short term with Alec Bohm, is he the guy that we saw in 2020? Is he the guy we saw in 2021? Is he some blend in somewhere in between? I mean, you look at these statistics right now. I believe Todd Zielecki, I want to give credit where credit's due since people don't always give Crossing Broad credit on things. You like that? That might be the sound clip. I think this is going to be the sound clip on Twitter. Yes, I am going to make sure that Todd Zielecki gets credit for this. I believe I was reading something from him yesterday in which he said that Alec Bohm is 5th on the team in hits despite the 11th most plate appearances, I believe he wrote. So that being said, do you believe in what you're seeing here? I'm not telling you that he's going to hit 500 this season, but is he a must-play at this point?
For now he is, I think. I mean, okay, I could see giving him a game off a week or something like that. You want to still keep his confidence up, right? I mean, even if he has a couple good games, say, all right, take a break and we'll get right back out there again. But yeah, I think for now you have to keep him in. And then if he starts to go south, then you take him out again. But yeah, you have to manage. I think you have to manage it as he's playing, and if he's playing well, keep giving him the at-bats. Keep giving him the shot.
Wouldn't that be a cool story? Listen, he comes in and he has this disastrous start and everybody's crushing him. He does the save face thing after the game, and I know that we all gave him a round of applause about how he handled it. I did. I thought he handled it very well. Was it fully sincere? Who knows? But I think he handled it in the moment as best as he possibly could after the game. And now all of a sudden he comes out and he's just crushing it and everyone loves him. I mean, he's going to, assuming he's in the lineup tonight or, Saturday, whenever he plays here, he's going to get probably one of the biggest applauses of any player on this team right now. Not only for what he said after that Mets game, but really for how he's performed since. So it's an interesting dynamic. It would be a rare positive story for this team.
Yeah, no, I agree.
For something like that. I've been saying this for 3 years. They're due for a guy, and I know he was a top 5 draft pick, and I know he's supposed to be the guy, but it would be great to see something unexpected go well for this team. And after his 2021, wouldn't it be nice if he was that guy? Where is the Shane Victorino for this team? Where is the Jason Worth for this team? It's time for something to pan out that you weren't necessarily counting on.
Yeah. No, 100%, Bob. 100%. 2 quick things to wrap this thing up. They have nothing to do with the Phillies. But they have to do, once again, with we talked a little bit last week about, quote-unquote unwritten rules, whether you want to say these are unwritten rules or not, just kind of along the same lines. They're probably not unwritten rules in these cases, but definitely were controversial. I think it occurred the night we recorded last week. Joe Madden walks Corey Seager with the bases loaded. Smart, or is that ridiculous?
Are you going to can I know which side of this you're going to be on?
It's ridiculous. Come on. You're giving a team a run. How's that? How's there any intelligence behind this whatsoever?
That's the ultimate.
With one out. No
that's
less.
The ultimate.
With one out,
I'm
no
the
less.
Smartest guy in the room, yeah. And it backfired. I know they went on to win the game, correct?
Yeah,
but in the moment, it did not pan out. I think they gave up 2 more runs beyond, so it was a 3-run inning. Yeah, and listen, we talked earlier in the show about instilling confidence and sending a message to your players. What does that do to a pitcher? You say, I don't have trust in you to get this guy out. I mean, it's not like peak Babe Ruth was up. I mean, Corey Seager knows
Corey Seager.
But come on, man.
That's ridiculous. In the fourth inning. Fourth inning, 1 out in the inning, and you're gonna intentionally walk a guy and give the other team a run. Makes 0 sense, Joe Madden.
Yeah, I can't even debate you on that because it's just it's crazy.
Beyond stupid. And here's one from last night. Miguel Cabrera is coming up. Chance to get his 3,000th hit in front of the home crowd in Detroit. They're winning the game 3-0. Bottom of the 8th. It was his last at bat of the day. Hey, Yankees intentionally walk him.
I thought that was probably the most embarrassing baseball story I read yesterday, except You had that college pitcher. I'm sure you saw that.
Tackled the third.
Crushing the guy coming around third base, and he was kicked off the team. By the way, I can't believe it. Had it not been for that, the Yankees walking Miguel Cabrera in that situation, down 3 runs, no less.
Yeah,
I think that would have been, I hate to use this word, but a violation. I think it would have been a violation had the game been tied in that spot. But I mean, come on, man, like that's horrible.
I mean, those people paid to go to that game to try and see history.
I gotta say, like, there's really and we're deep into the show, so if you're still listening, then you're hardcore. I mean, what an ultimate fuck you, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Come on.
Now, the good news is that at least Detroit's still at home this weekend, so those fans will get an opportunity to see it against Colorado this weekend. But because could you imagine if that was it and then they were going on a road trip?
Leaving town after that? Yeah.
Oh, man. Would have been even worse. Would have been even worse. But, yeah, that's bad. The Yankees, no good there either.
Well, there you go. 2 episodes in 1 week. As usual, we went longer than we had anticipated, but that's okay. So the Phillies have a big weekend with the Milwaukee Brewers ahead. They need to get back on track. Will they? Won't they? Who the hell knows? But we will be back on Monday morning to talk about this, and that will be when you can expect our latest episode of Crossed Up. For Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. Make sure that you subscribe, follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now, I believe, so you can check us out pretty much anywhere. If we're going to be on YouTube, Anthony, moving forward, I got to make sure that I shave and put on a nicer shirt. I was kind of caught off guard by this. I got a text message from Russ. He's like, make sure you tell people you can follow Crossing Broad on YouTube. And I said, oh, come on, man. So I just got out of bed. Come on.
That's all good.
Right?
All good.
Hopefully for the people, I'll look a little bit more cleaned up next time, and we will talk to you guys soon.